So I think we see biocultural diversity and decolonization as these thought projects that allow us to think very, very locally and very specifically about what the communities we work with want to bring about in the present and in the future.
It's great to see so many here for the inaugural Eleanor Sterling Memorial Lecture. You're going to notice, both for me and for, I think, I know our panelists, this is a bit of a emotional time, remembering Eleanor in this way. She was an extraordinary scientist, teacher, a mentor, environmental advocate, colleague, and of course, a friend. While people like me in my field, I'm also an oceans scientist, we're congratulating ourselves for taking an ecosystem-wide approach to our work in the coastal zone. Eleanor was literally creating an entirely new approach to the research. And that new approach was aimed at recognizing the other part of the ecosystem that had up until then been ignored: the presence and influence of humans on that ecosystem. Her work, much of it in the Pacific, was not just place-based, it was people-based. Understanding and respecting the indigenous knowledge systems and ways of knowing that existed long before she arrived wherever she was conducting her research. And she used that understanding and the human presence and influence as critical context for the work that she did. She brought that approach here to us when she moved from New York City to HIMB to continue and expand her remarkable work. We have a long way to go in carrying on Eleanor's legacy and incorporating her approach in all aspects of what we do. But here at Manoa, uniquely, our work in environmental conservation includes Native Hawaiian scholars and cultural practitioners, Pacific Island scholars, the marine sciences, anthropology, archaeology, botanists, geographers, ecologists, and yes, even our law school professors. We are truly unique in the approach that we take here in this area of our work. Our guests this evening are vital contributors to these conversations that are literally revolutionizing environmental conservation around the world. So too is Dr. Megan Donahue, the interim director of HIMB, who will introduce them. Megan is a marine ecologist with training in computational and systems biology. She just told me that's a modern word for what she actually studied. She'll tell you. Megan is a marine ecologist with training. Her current research involves water quality and ecosystem function, and she confirmed with me this evening that she has indeed developed an early warning system in the Pacific for carrying disease outbreaks across the Pacific. Megan has been working to carry forward many of the initiatives that Eleanor began here at HIMB. Please welcome Megan Donegan.
Aloha. Thank you, Michael. And I'm really pleased to welcome you to this event that honors the legacy of Dr. Eleanor Sterling. We were honored to welcome Eleanor and Kevin to the HIMB Ohana in January of 22. And we're really pleased to be able to honor her this evening as well. Connecting people with place was central to her life and career, and her understanding that people and their places are fundamentally intertwined continues to inspire and connect us. Our speakers tonight, Paige and John, and our moderator, Alex, were her friends and colleagues, and now ours as well. And through this exchange of ideas and the discussion that follows, we hope to honor her memory and continue to be inspired. I'm going to introduce our guests in a moment. And before that, I'd like to thank the sponsors for this evening's event, the Eleanor Sterling Fund for the Hawaii Institute of Marine Biology, the School of Ocean, Earth Science and Technology, and the Center for Pacific Island Studies in the College of Arts, Languages, and Letters. Did I get that right? Ooh, did I? Thank you, Peter. Okay. And we're really honored that this this memorial lecture is part of the Better Tomorrow Speaker Series, which is a joint venture of the Kamehameha Schools and Hawaii Community Foundation. And we thank the Kaimana Beach Hotel for putting up our guests. I think they had a lovely stay. So thanks very much. Well, we are incredibly honored to have John Aini, the founder and director of Ailan Awareness, a marine conservation and Indigenous empowerment organization in New Ireland, Papua New Guinea. He is a Maimai, a chief in the Malangan culture in northern New Ireland, an Ikandik, a chief in the Tumbuan Society of southern New Ireland, and a Merengen, a chief in his own Tunguk culture from Lovengal, New Hanover. Paige West is the Claire Tao Professor of Anthropology at Barnard College and Columbia University. She's the co-founder of the Papua New Guinea Institute of Biological Research and the Rungava Solvara School. She serves as the director of Columbia's Transdisciplinary Research Lab at the Climate School, and she is the author of 3 books about Papua New Guinea. John and Paige will share the story of how they came to work together many years ago. Our moderator this evening is our own Alex Mawyer, a linguistic and cultural anthropologist and director of the Center of Pacific Island Studies. His research includes language and space in ocean linguistics, conservation and sovereignty, and marine resource governance in the Pacific. So he is well situated to engage with John and Paige in this conversation and really engage us as well. Along with Rachel Dax, he co-taught a course with Eleanor and the marine biology graduate program called People in the Sea, Exploring Multiple Perspectives of Marine Systems. So Alex, Paige, and John, I've really enjoyed meeting Paige and John, and I'm going to leave this conversation to Alex and really excited to hear what y'all have to say. Thank you so much.
Ali Hafade, Buenas, Mogathin, Yahweh, Rananim, Kasalehia, Yorana Tato, Protokoto, Bulavanakalevo, Maloele, Talofalava, Danito, and many other warm oceanic greetings, along with Aloha Mai Kako. I'm reminded of the words from Apeli Hau'ofa in 1998 in a UH Press journal. The ocean that surrounds us is the one physical entity that all of us in Oceania share. It is the inescapable fact of our lives. What we lack is the conscious awareness of it, its implications, and what we could do with it. The challenge of Hau'ofa's thoughts about ocean, this ocean that surrounds us, that binds us, that connects us, remains with us today, decades later. As we note, ocean is 71% of our world's surface area. Just the Moananui Kea that surrounds Kapa'aina o Hawaii and the islands that are bound together across this sea of islands, as John and Kavika exchanged earlier. Just this ocean is 30% of the global surface area. As one of our Pacific Studies heroes, Teresia Taiawa, noted, if arriving from outer space and encountering this third planet from our sun for the first time, this ocean, the Pacific Ocean, would be the single most salient geographical fact of this planet. We live on water world, on blue world. We live in island world. And yet, this world has failed its islands and peoples in a variety of ways, right? We are confronted today by a polycrisis of acidification, warming, insane intensification of storm activity, sea level rise, coastal erosion, biodiversity loss, ecological degradation and fragmentation of coral reef ecosystems, and other hazard drivers. Just 5 years ago in Nature, one of the world's most potent journals, 5 years ago, 2018, a group of scientists could publish a commentary in Nature noting for all of the science readers that we had failed in our responsibility to protect the, quote, what they called in the title of that piece, the neglected half of our blue planet. Scholars, activists, agents like John and Paige, however, have not been failing our island worlds. They have been lifting up this space in an era of sea change around decolonial actions by land and by sea change around conservation norms for actors from the ground up and also from the top down. You have both been playing roles through overlapping and distinct positionalities in the indigenizing and oceanizing conservation, conversation, and advancing marine stewardship through Oceanian and place-based care. John, I wonder if you could tell us how you got into working on marine stewardship in New Ireland.
I guess the call came when I was still in my mother's womb. I was born about 8 meters away from the ocean. Probably that time while in my mom's womb, because mom kept on telling me while she was near the ocean, I kept on kicking. And I guess having grown up, I see now that probably the call to look after the ocean, probably I started hearing the waves come on the beach when I was still in my mom's womb. I've lived close to how many years old, Paige? And I've witnessed almost 85 meters of our land gone, and the place where my mom gave birth to me. And so I think it started from there. But having grown up next to the ocean, next to this coral reef that were abundant with so many fish, a magnitude of everything that was supposed to be in there, and having gone to school and to come back and starting to see that the color is no longer there. The colors of the corals are no longer there. The colorful fish and in different sizes are no longer there. And so started thinking that something needed to be done about this. So yeah, what we see right now is not what was seen before. Yeah, we see a few coral reefs with the colors they have now, but they are not the colors that when they were created, they are totally different. And so I think, the call to start looking for ways to ensure that there was a fish out at sea started the call was when I was in my mom's womb. And so I'd gone to school for a little while, learned a little science, and through the course of my work, continued to see the demise, the decline. And so since 1993, we started working to conduct awareness, to talk to our people about the little things that we were doing was not supporting life in the marine environment. I guess, yeah, that's how I started. Yeah.
Paige, how about you? How did you get into conservation work?
Well, it's always surprising to me that I ended up working in and around oceans because I really started out as a terrestrial girl. I kind of learned to love the world in the mountains of North Georgia. And as a child, spent quite a bit of time, for people that know the mainland, Georgia's Cherokee land. And that's where I grew up. That's where I learned to love frogs and fish and trees and mountains. And you know, when I went to university, I'm a first-generation college student. When I went to university, like many first-generation students, I thought that the only options for me were to become a doctor, a lawyer, or a business person. And so I majored in something that I had no business majoring in, that I didn't really enjoy. And my senior year, I took a class called Human Ecology, and it blew my mind because I realized that I could actually think about the world around us and the relationship people have with that world in creative and interesting ways. After that, I went to the University of Georgia and was lucky enough to work with someone who was a young environmental anthropologist. And I did a project on a thing called the Pinhook Swamp, which is a gigantic swamp that connects Georgia and Florida and makes the Osceola, the Pinhook, and the Okefenokee one of the largest contiguous wetland bodies in the lower 48 states. The project I did was looking at a really innovative conservation project that was done by the Nature Conservancy that was meant to protect this area. And I noticed pretty much immediately that there were lots of outsiders who had come in and were not paying attention to what the people who were living in the swamps wanted, were not paying attention to what people who were living in the swamps needed, and were kind of derisive about Southerners in general. Many of them were from the Northeast. And so I became really fascinated by the role that conservation plays in occluding or erasing what local communities want and need. And then from there went on to do a PhD in the highlands of Papua New Guinea, looking at a major conservation project that was on indigenous lands. I initially had thought that I would write only about the Euro-American conservation organizations, but was lucky enough to meet an incredible elder named Kusiama Calloway, who told me that I was crazy if I thought I would know anything about Papua New Guinea without going to a village. And so because of Kusiama's provocation, I was able to go and live in a place and really learn about the relationship between external conservation organizations and indigenous lifeways and indigenous science, and wrote a book about that early on, and was lucky once again to have made a lot of friends who were Papua New Guinean scientists, and for them to say to me repeatedly when my first book came out, what are you going to do for us? What are you going to do after you've written this book that's gotten you this fancy job? What are you going to give back to our communities? And so I feel like my relationship with conservation has been, number one, a critical engagement, trying to explain to outsiders why they need to actually stop and listen and be with people in community. And then two, to really think about what can I do as a scholar and just a citizen of the world to make sure that the people that I spend time with and that I love are the people that are listened to by everyone when it comes to environmental transitions.
So, John, you started Ailan Awareness, a marine stewardship organization, with your brother and cousin brother. What brought you to that work and to start working with Paige?
Oh my golly. It's a long story. We met in a car park. What do you call it? Yeah.
Car park.
A car park, yeah. And this was next to where I work. And she had gone to visit friends who they've known and were working with bingos. And I had a little office next to where this big office was, and every time she comes out, she'll see me sitting around chewing betel nut. I decided to brush my teeth before coming here. Yeah, chewing betel nut, having a cigarette and laughing and a lot of jokes. And she continues to do that. She's us almost every day doing that. And I think she goes in and asks this, one of the in charge of that bingo, and oh, that's John Aini. That's what he does. Sits outside there, half naked. Half naked, chewing betel nut, smoking, and laughing and all this. We carry on outside there. And so she approaches me and she asks me, John, what are you doing? And I said, I'm doing this and that. What they call now collecting data. And we started this conversation. And this was in 2007. And that conversation started, and right up to this second, we are here. She left me saying, John, if I go back to the States, I will try to get assistance to help you do your work. And so, during those conversations, I think she'll talk more about it. We found out that there were things common between us. She had that approach. She nearly turned me into an anthropologist. But I'm a fisheries guy. And from the fisheries knowledge that I had, the little science that I knew, I think together we would make things happen for our people. And so, that's how I met her, in a parking lot. In a parking lot. Yeah.
Paige, what about you? How would you describe how you came into collaboration with John?
Probably the same story. We met in a parking lot in New Ireland, and I was visiting people that work at a big international NGO, and I was struck that they kept talking about how there was this local guy that ran a conservation organization that would just sit around and do nothing all afternoon. And I would look out, and what I saw was that every single person who was coming into the wharf in a boat and had fish in the boat, every single person who was bringing food in for the markets, every single person who was bringing food or bringing family to the hospital, everybody stopped and talked to John and his team. And all of the information about what was happening on the outer islands was coming into this small NGO. And I did see anthropologists, or I saw researchers, I saw people that were collecting information in a really systematic and beautiful way to work that information into the conservation projects that they were doing at the time. And so we started talking. A wonderful man named Hugh Walton actually introduced us properly. And we started talking, and we realized that we had these radically different backgrounds. And we had come to the sort of same critique of big international NGOs. And in short, it was that they just didn't listen. And they brought in external ideas that had very little relevance to the people that were actually living with the biodiversity that they wanted to protect. And we had weeks and weeks of conversations about it. And one of the most memorable ones for me was when we realized that we'd both been quite critical and quite vocal about these big NGOs to the big NGOs. And people would come back to us always and say, well, could you do it better? And we looked at each other right before I left, and we said, well, maybe we could do it better. And we were incredibly lucky to get some just amazing flexible funding from Christensen. And they basically said to us, you guys go, do you, let's see what happens. And here we are.
I love the serendipity of this encounter story. And one of the things that jumps out at me as you're speaking is this intersection between different data collection, different approaches to data. One of the things that, Paige, as you were speaking, you noted that John is collecting work, John's collecting information, John's doing work that has this biocultural dimension, knowledges that interweave cultural values, place-based expertise, and responsibilities alongside biophysical data. I wonder if you could both tell us a little bit more about the biocultural dimension of your work and how it connects to what people might call decolonizing conservation.
The simple things that we do at home are just simple, and we know how to do it. When I met Paige, this word comes up, biocultural, and I'm confused. I never went to a big school to understand those connections of those big words. And then I continue to do what I do, and I walk into, well, there's all these emails going. Eleanor pops into the picture, and that word pops up again, biocultural, and I'm just confused. What is all this bullshit about? And then she tells me, it is what you have already been doing. And then, yeah, these two women continue to confuse me. But it is all about connecting people. And we talk about these connections now, but our people, our ancestors, were always connected with themselves and with everything around them. And I don't know, in your modern language, in what you're studying, is that biocultural? But they tell me it is biocultural. And so, yeah, we are trying to paste those two words together. And I cannot talk any longer about this because what I've been doing, they put it in their language, in their scientific big jargon words. And yeah. And it's simply, it is connecting with people and knowing what they are associated with, knowing what they are working within, knowing what spaces and what connections are there to all come together to make things happen, to ensure that there is a fish out at sea, to ensure there is always food in the garden, to ensure those birds are flying and happy in the beautiful jungle. You know, all those type of things. And it is an everyday thing, that island awareness that we do and talk about. And then comes all these big words. Paige, you talk about it.
Well, so in about 2004, Eleanor and I, maybe in 2003, she was one of the first people that I met at Columbia University, and Columbia University is a whole deal. It's just a thing. People are not loving and kind at my university. And she was one of the first people I met, and she was loving and kind, and we became friends pretty quickly. And we started in about 2004 thinking about teaching this class on the relationship between biological diversity, sociocultural diversity, and language. And so we taught this class for quite a while. And in reading for that class and talking with Eleanor, we sort of decided that there was absolutely something to this biocultural literature that was emerging. And the literature was emerging around then, that time period. We thought there was something to it, but we also were both a little like, there's some stuff wrong with it. And so we were thinking through together in our class the good work that that term does, and then also the way that that term has the potential to make it seem like everything's the same everywhere. Every relationship that, say, Indigenous people have with the environment is the same in every setting. And so we had some nervousness about it. John pretty much called me out on the term really early on because there was a lot of money coming online in 2007 and 2008 around biocultural work. And I was saying, well, we should apply for this. It's what Islands Awareness has been doing forever and ever and ever. Let's just apply. And he pushed me to think much more carefully about what we meant by biocultural diversity and about the kinds of things that thinging the stuff that people in New Ireland had been doing for 3,000 years in this term biocultural, how that was a little bit problematic. And I think that connects to our decolonial approach insofar as when we think about the emerging attention to decolonization and to conservation, I think we're collectively excited about it, but we both feel like there's a way in which the colonial history and the ongoing colonialism in New Ireland, Papua New Guinea, is different than in other places in the world. It's not the same as in every single place. And so we've shifted from thinking only about decolonization and transforming the kinds of external systems that have come in and changed things in New Ireland to thinking a lot more about how do we indigenize conservation and how do we make it very much about what people in New Ireland want and need and what people in New Ireland think is important for the future. And so I think we see biocultural diversity and decolonization as these thought projects that allow us to think very, very locally and very specifically about what the communities we work with want to bring about in the present and in the future.
Alex, can I cut in? It not only stopped at biocultural. Along the way, it went into socio-cultural, and that made me confused.
In this, no, in this turn that you're describing.
Okay, can I interrupt?
Nope, go for it.
So one of the other things that in thinking about the biocultural and reading that literature, right, because we bring these very different perspectives.
This to make me to, they bombard my brain. I never went to that big school.
But okay, so I bombard John with a lot of big academic words, but one of the things that in reading that literature and then sitting not just with John, but with the many elders that we work with, seeing the way in which the literature on biocultural diversity was not attending to the spirit world in a way that people in New Ireland wanted the spirit world attended to. Because the spirit world is incredibly present in every relationship that people have between humans, between creatures, between the land, between the sea, all of it. And so I think that biocultural diversity as a thought project also allowed us to say, but so what is it that's happening here in New Ireland that gets not erased by that, but that doesn't get included in the literature? And so what I hope we've done is expand the sense of biocultural diversity, even with John's derisive humor about it.
Leaving the terms aside, one of the things that you're talking about for us is this place-based turn, this relational turn to place, this grounding in place of very significant conservation and stewardship and nurturing work. And one of the things that we see inside that turn is the persistent, apparent tension between indigenous science or indigenous ways of knowing and doing and understanding and the biophysical sciences, the so-called Western or disciplinary sciences. I wonder if you could, just following up on what you've shared with us, say a little bit more about your approach to science, whatever science is, and its place in your thinking vis-a-vis the localizing, oceanizing, indigenizing work that you're holding up. John, any thoughts about science?
Science has taught me a lot of things. Though we have our own ways in telling that there is fish in abundance. There's so many resources that we have in abundance. I never made it to graduate school. I only have a certificate in tropical fisheries and finished in year 12. But during the course of my work, I learned because I wanted to know more about the ocean. And science has contributed in a way that I can estimate populations of sedentary organisms. I can do population structure of the organisms in a particular area. And I am able to, with the beach stem fishery now, to set what they call the total allowable catch. That is what science has taught me. Were you asking about science? Mm. Yeah, and a lot of it was not learned. It was accumulated, or it was learned through my years of work. And so, we cannot brush away science, though there is this push to continue on the way we have always done things. And, these two need to work together. Yeah, if I needed to write a proposal to ask for money to help me with my work back at home, they would need data. They would need they would need real facts and all these things for me to qualify to apply. So that science is important in that way. Did I answer your question?
Thank you so much. I wonder, Paige, if you'd like to pick up more. Thank you so much.
Yeah. You know, as a scholar, part of my preoccupation is about how different communities of sentiment make knowledge about the world. And I sort of started out doing this anthropology of conservation, which was a kind of anthropology of science. How do conservation scientists know and understand and produce the world? And so I think early on, I saw the tension between indigenous science in the highlands of New Guinea and conservation science. And when I started working with John in New Ireland, one of the things that I noticed immediately was that there were communities that we were spending time with that had pretty serious questions about biophysical change. And they were answering those questions themselves. They were theorizing the changes that they were seeing. They were understanding the things that they were seeing. And they were asking us to help them understand them in different ways. And so communities were saying, well, we see fish decline. I always think about sandfish, Panachias. So one community that we work with saw these sandfish disappearing, and they had lots of indigenous science telling them why it's disappearing. And elders came to us and said, well, so what are some other possible reasons? They wanted all the information. And so for me, working with scientists allows us to kind of braid together multiple forms of knowledge so that folks on the ground can then make decisions about what they want to do about a change that they see with a full suite of knowledge. And we'll talk later about the saltwater school that we founded together, but that school is really about putting different knowledges in conversation and putting them on equal ground. And so I think that we value science. You know, we're still collectively, I think, critical of some of the way in which scientific data is given primacy over data that's not seen as scientific. And so we'd love for that to change. But yeah, I think I'll leave it at that.
And so, Alex, talking about science, we were doing this survey, and I'm going down to 15 meters of water to start setting the transects to do the counts. And as soon as I reach the floor, and there is that black thing there. And he sees me, and he's scared, and he runs that way, and I go that way. It was a dugong. The tape measure goes that way, and I'm back up there. And so within the time, science has taught me, and we've been monitoring, we were doing stock assessments. And over the time, I saw that there was a continued decline in sedentary resources, trochus shells, beach stemmer, giant clams. Yeah, that is science now to me. Yeah.
You know, I wonder if you could say a little bit about some of the specific projects that the two of you have created together with communities in New Ireland that have these qualities of localizing, grounding in place, and potentially decolonizing, picking up on some of these themes.
Yeah, maybe I'll start. John's going to talk about our big kind of signature project, but you know, all of our work is really in partnership with communities and focused on local self-determination in terms of biological, spiritual, community futures. And so we do a lot of different things, but we kind of class things under two broad categories. The first category is revitalization. And the revitalization projects, I don't think when we first started working together, we had any idea that we would do this work. But communities, and in particular elders, came to us over and over and over again after seeing that we were working with communities who saw something biophysically declining, and we were helping them figure out how to stave off that decline. People started coming to us and saying, well, we're seeing these other things declining, and we want some help figuring out how to make sure they don't go away. And so these revitalization projects, we have a series of them. One of them is a project to strengthen the network regionally around New Ireland province between elders. All the communities have these incredible elders. They have all of this work that they're doing together in situ. And Cornelius Gassot, actually, one of our favorite people in the world came to us and helped us understand that by networking elders, we could help to revitalize knowledge systems. Another project that we do together is the Maligan Project, and that is, Maligan is a system in a part of New Ireland that takes you all the way from conception, through birth, through life, through death, and then back out to the sea. And you know, Maligan has, as part of it, these incredible carvings. You would have maybe seen them in museums. They're represented around the world. These Maligan carvings are a huge part of this total social fact. And the last 6 living carvers came to us and said, we see you doing these conservation projects, and so we're gonna need you to do some work for us. And they wanted to figure out how to ethically pass on carving techniques and how to do it in a way that allowed them to work with people in their own families, but also other families. And so we helped them start some carving schools, and that's still running. And then we also have a project that's focused on the way in which women's traditional practices undergird what gets called conservation by outsiders, but often get erased when people come to look at conservation projects. And so we work with a young women's collective to help them think through what are the practices that they want to endure into the future, and how do we pair them with elders so that they can learn those practices if maybe they're not being done in their own communities. And then our last the second sort of broad area that we work in, projects are focused on securing Indigenous sovereignty over biocultural futures. And the school that we co-founded is part of that. And then our internship that we founded is part of that, our internship program. We work with interns from elementary schools, from high schools, from local colleges, from all over the world, to get folks thinking about the relationship between people and place. And we particularly focus on Papua New Guinean students who want to work in a kind of decolonial conservation mode, but may not have had mentors at university or other places that work in that mode. And so those are the things that, part of what we do, but John will tell you about the major part of what we do.
Am I talking?
You're talking.
So for the last 10 years, after finding out that there was an equivalent to management and conservation in my Tungak language, that there was a word in my own language that was equivalent to those 2 words. And then I started thinking, what am I doing? What am I doing with all these white concepts? These are like hot potatoes that come through my throat and I vomit them out. And so knowing that there were these words in my language, we started going back, talking to the communities, talking to our elders. We don't have many more of our elders left. There is only an handful. And we are racing against time to sit down with them and get whatever they have left now. But there are complications to that. It needs to be passed on only to their bloodline. And so I found in the language that there was this word Vala, V-A, Violet, Alpha, Lima, Alpha. And that meant conservation. That meant management. And it was not only a practice that was brought in with this new conservation concept. It was there long before my parents were born. And so started going back and investigating how they worked around this word to manage our river. And so found out that this was a very strict, what they call in Fiji, I think, tambu. And so I've dished out the names locally, marine management areas, MPAs. I don't want to hear more about those words. Vala is our way to go. And so it is not only placing we see the physical side of things, but it is interconnected with our spirits. The graves, the chanting, the fasting, and all this. We have worked on this for almost 10, 15 years. And we now have 7 to 8 of these Vala areas around our island. It is not foreign. We believe it is ours, it is in our blood, and so the tendency to respect this, yes, we know there's poaching every now and then, should be greater if it is our language. And so, yeah, and we are trying to continue on to strengthen this work. And it ties up to the men's house, it ties up to the women's house. The women's house, what was it used for? The men's house, what was it used for? And so everything is intertwined. Yeah, having come to having been done in my early years working on conservation, I have been floating. But having found these two words, I think I have a firm setting now that is strong, that has got roots, that is my culture, that is my way, and I know I'm going to continue on to work with my people, with the valor. Yeah.
I know we've brought a short film from Ailan Awareness, about 10 minutes long, that makes visible the kinds of work that John and Paige are discussing tonight. Can we screen the film?
I am John Aini from Lavangai village. Mom gave birth to me in 1964, next to the ocean, 5 meters away. I think that's why I love this ocean so much. Times are getting difficult now, with population increase, climate change, sea level rise. "30, 40 years ago, only 5 hens were eating from the coral reefs. Now we have 100 people eating from the coral reefs.
Lain belum ya, kini tawan logo. Ailan em bukan tamatay Ailan. Population now lomi pla, iwak logo. Hai. Na level belum pisi isot. Nami foul. Aku bay, dimitara belum kau temu something. Last Monday mitok lo community mitok lo di sila. Iwat mani, bay wadarin pis lo nar belakang kam.
I've worked for so many years as a conservationist, as a manager, and I've witnessed a lot of failures in my work. I was witnessing people using poison ropes and throwing plastics in the ocean, using unsustainable fishing methods.
Biklepis na minanap lalukin biklepis na nambis. Ol trepe diwawe pisa kay kaman nit longan na wem nokat na. Sina ko kay pile sa kamantap na.
My name is Jenna Kwama. I'm a student of the Pacific Adventist University studying environmental science. My mother is from Milne Bay Province and my father is from the New Ireland Province. I am learning so much about my father's culture since I grew up somewhere else. I'd love to speak on women's behalf to make sure that the men actually act upon what they say, not just consider one side only.
A reef, me important long life from flower Mary because all get a family only needing protein. Me play like in fish because it's free. Me play kissing free long solwara.
I find John Aini so different. He believes in his traditional practice and he's also a scientist.
I did not believe what foreign concepts of resource management was bearing fruit there. And so I went back to investigating what our people in the past did, that there were ways in our customs that were used before to protect our environment.
Before a long time, the Greek
wala tradition mak belum mipla o sign belum respect na lukaw tim rip.
Lo tisla walaya. Mibin liklik na mistafan tempa Pablo mi. Misaring. Olsem wala time oli sa putim lo rif. Oli sa pasim olman lo noken golo dislap.
Wala is our traditional way to manage and protect these resources. The wala is a mark to stop any activity from happening in a particular area. So that is basically what it does. It is a tambu.
Mia mamaslo disla wala because miluhim result blongin finish. Tasol pasin blongol man tasol lo baharapim.
Ah! Asangong! Asangong! Orodway! Pasang ruang sere. Hari silage! Hari silage! Ha! Alalalala! Ah! Alalalala!
Grow up lawyer, come up na milukim plenty. All good blow work, side blow work custom, where blow look out him solwara.
Look, Angos! A family! Aini Rama! Family! Bakit po kami rengete? Ma? Mahal ko telo ang kamasani, tama mo, rin na mo, tibum! Kita po sa mga kulianit ke, utan nas, taku serebe kami renge, tekalay niya ke, aulitay bugay ke, nakuta sugalya, kate mak, kate signify, ang magbileta, basis ke, katamu, na manuasi ko bilarige, sau-sau bay, kasangu singwa, na kumas bilakorong.
And so we place that wala, this traditional and customary significance. It is painted in such a way. Other things are put on it that in our belief will look after the reef.
I think this la last wala time Papa Blom he been live. He been stopped since now we come back in. This la a traditional custom that we calling up wala. Osem. Mak no na me osem. This la now. By tambu long onek kan fishing method olin lo kan wokim lo ya. Dots, uben, hook, by stuff inside lo. Good blow lookout. After that, you got all good blow resources na you come up. O say peace na iplanti. Imilukin mo sa maninit lo good blow lookout iplanti. Come out tim na sila wala. Tok sabi long community only can come na harvest him something lo. Glory.
I worry so much about my people because so many things are happening. Westernization is happening. A lot of our people have forgotten about our ways. We have lost a lot of our traditions, our cultures, because when we have come to realize that our old people are dying, they have not given us what they know.
John pisa mi stop. So aninit lo look blomi because Papa Blomi traditional. Lo look out him this or something. Me no like him PC wild.
We were tasked to take care of this environment. We were asked to become stewards. The Vala is important in the way that it helps all of us. The whole community benefits from it.
John, all this la flower. Now, close to him, suppose night, you go. Peace by sleep inside. Nasa po sinogat. Pisino ka tao sebelumnya. Em bay run away, painim good bla 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 silip. Wan kaino sem itu bla. Di bla mas ka tao sebelum silip.
Evala is trying to bring back the experiences, the bountifulness, and the beauty from the past. We basically benefit from catching a lot more fish to feed the family.
Time all man only put him wala long all reef. All man only say respect him.
Na mi play pili mo sem pisi walk long comeback. Mi play sim good piece long all side area long Tambu area.
So time mi play put him Tambu, mi play lugi mo sem. Pis na walk long come close to lo leblong nambis. Gam tu time mi play la ko was ta so mi play kan lugi mo liglig gam walk long. Prol na ba long all garasya. Oceania mi play lugi mo sem se true. Time mi play lugi tim salwara all sel something will come back.
All face wala itu play sanapim. That's one of them. Face wala. Aptalo, mi tu play bin pasim. Deslarip, John, mi top. Mi tu play si down one time. Nini lo house one time or sem. Rainbow rana. Come out lo liung ngay kamantap mi. All the time rainbow rana. Na time mi kamantap. Bigli pumpen string umbennya. Na time mi drop in the string umbennya. All the time brook.
Tradition is the right way to go forward in terms of resource management. It is not something foreign. It is custom, it is culture, it is our way of doing things, so it is part of us.
It actually opened my eyes to go back and learn the traditional practice that were already there.
You know, I believe in science, but science alone does not realize management. There should be a mix of what we are doing and science, and together things will work.
Tell us a little bit more about your follow work and the work you're doing to restore and revitalize some of the fish trap practices.
I thought I had answered it in the last. Well, there are two. I don't know what the word is, but there are two practices that we do, and I think it all contributes to resource management. In 2008-9, I think, we resurrected after 80 years of non-existent practice known as ngoto. And that was a fish trap, called a fish trap to catch fish. And it also provided an haven for fish to go and live in harmony, not be afraid of anything, because it was under restrictions not to touch it. And so we brought up that. The science now tells me that not only was it a fish trap, and the changes of climate change, now it is seen as a what? As a reef blockage to slow down the surge, the wave surges that are coming in that are now continuing to take our coast away and away from us. So, yeah, I think when it was done when our ancestors initiated this, probably served those two purposes. But us growing recklessly after they were gone, only saw it as serving only one purpose, and that was to provide an haven, and it was a traditional fishing method too. This thing is quite mysterious, is the word maybe, because we have a resemblance of that, a replica, exact replica of that on our coral reefs in the terrestrial environment, but it's much smaller than what is placed out there. We are still trying to find out if what was the purpose for the thing. How could it be set up there and not catching fish when there are other animals up there? But thinking along the spiritual side of things, I think that's where it all happened, to ensure that that trap, that enclosure provided an environment where this fish would be in. Yeah, so after 80 years, this is coming back quite slowly, but we don't want to go full speed ahead with it, as long as it is sinking slowly into the youngs of the young minds, into the minds of the young mind, whatever it is. Yeah. And then we take it step by step, yeah. And that is a different type of vala. What we have just seen now is a different type of vala. And yeah, vala just means whatever you people call it, tambu in Fiji, conservation area, LLMA. I don't want to mention those words anymore.
Gosh, Paige, how wonderful it is that people are beginning to acknowledge that there needs to be this kind of work, including on the information or data side, a co-production of the knowledge spaces that we move through to support this kind of work. However, I wonder if you could say something about the challenge of this epistemological and methodological transition, the risks of a kind of hollowing out of the actual processes by which respect and engagement with the kind of work that John's talking about can happen when the desire for this kind of approach overtakes the work needed to realize it.
I want to talk about our methodology.
Ooh.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the things that has been a pleasure for me as an outsider to do with John is to come up with a methodology for doing this work. And we feel like, along with the elders that really guide us, we have three major principles. One of them is that we step up. When people ask us to come and to work with them, we do it. We mobilize resources, and we get people who are experts if we don't have the expertise to help. And then we step back. And I'll talk a little bit about all three of those things. So, you know, all of the communities that we spend time with, even if they're communities from John's island that are not his community, they come to us. We don't go to them. They come to us and they say, there's something in the world that we want to understand. There's something in the world that we want to make better. There's something in the world that we want to change. And John and the team from Islands Awareness go out and spend time in those communities, and they really say, well, this is what Islands Awareness is about. This is what we do. This is what we can do. This is what we can't do. This is what this random white woman that we work with can do and can't do. These are the kinds of things that might happen if external researchers come to your village. These are the kinds of things that are not going to happen if external researchers come to your village. And then we step back. Islands Awareness steps back. And if the community comes back and says, well, no, we really do have this problem that we want to solve. Can you help us? We mobilize resources. And those resources can be that I'm a pretty good grant writer, and so we write grants. We find scientists who can help answer questions that people there are having trouble answering. And then we work with people, the Islands Awareness team works with people to come up with a plan. Are they going to create a vala? Are they going to try to revitalize something? Are they going to do something different? And then the plan sits with people, and they make the decision about how to implement that plan and how to manage it. The Islands Awareness Team goes out and visits all the communities repeatedly, but these projects belong to communities. And I think that collectively we feel like these projects are super successful because we step back. And one of the other things that methodologically we think is important is that anything we write about this work is approved by the people that we're writing about. We spend a lot of time doing this incredible work that we could probably write 1 million scientific and social scientific papers about, and we don't really do that because although I'm an academic, I often think that a lot of academic publications don't really do much in the world to help the people that they're written about. And so we spend an awful lot of time deciding what we're gonna write about alongside our elders. And you know, as an anthropologist, there's so many times when I still have that impulse to get in there and be like, ooh, there's gonna be a ritual. And then I step back and I think, oh, that's not mine. I don't need to know about that. That's something that the pieces of it that are important for me to understand, John or one of the elders is gonna tell me. And so that stepping back for me is about that. And I think the stepping back for John, is to say, I can't fix everything. I can't do everything. I can't make everybody's life better. And to say, okay, we're gonna train the next generation of young people to be able to do this same kind of work.
John, thinking with Paige's insights on methodology, I wonder what you see as the major challenges or opportunities for conservation or management in New Ireland.
Firstly, we need to get our land back. There has been this special agriculture business list introduced by our own people, our government, that has initiated all these agriculture projects in the pretext of agriculture, but it was all for logging, raping naked of our forest resources. And there was nothing we could do about it. I come from an island that since 2006 has been in a civil war. We've been fighting against each other, killing each other with bush knives, mincing up bodies. And it was all because it started off with a boyfriend-girlfriend affair, and then it went everywhere. And land issues and logging were part of that. For the last 4 years, I've been settling this and working around with my people. Firstly, Alex, 75% of our land is no longer ours. It has been taken away. And to this date, we still don't have the titles to it. The sad part about it is our own elites were part of these arrangements to take away that 75%, use it for agriculture, and we are finding out that it has been sold to Malaysians. There is still a court order in place. We've submitted papers almost 15 years now with Shelco. We don't know yet when we will be let known if the court case, we will win the court case. But regardless, our people still think that is their land. They've started slowly going back in to toil the land. Now, we have vast plantations of oil palm that is on the mainland of New Ireland. And the threats to what we do in the oceans, you know, those things cannot grow without fertilizer. New Ireland has gotten a complex underwater system that these fertilizers get into the sea and affect that creation, that nature that was supposed to be there, LT of whatever, what all this that goes in there, and should be kept healthy. We've got these two big mines, probably in the southern hemisphere, based on our island that is threatening our oceans. And logging, they say 93% of New Ireland is logged. And so, yeah, we are faced with all these challenges. We understand the connectedness between the systems right from the ice mountains right down to the depths of the ocean. And without taking care of these things, there is an effect to this. So our efforts in talking about marine conservation, in trying to bring back our spirits, would be wasted without looking at all this. So, yeah, to sum up, we've got oil palm going, we have got logging Papua New Guinea, and the mining and prospecting that continues to happen. So those are the threats that we are faced up against, challenging our efforts to work with our communities. Yeah.
Paige, it's a difficult juxtaposition, but I wonder if you might speak to the challenge, the scholar's challenge of a journey as someone who's not always seen or understood to be an active steward, but as an academic writer, as professor, and the way that you've faced that challenge in integrating, often quietly, your scholarly work with your work of community building, relationship, and care for people in place and the things that sustain them.
Yeah, when I started out as an academic anthropologist, I got the job that I have now in 2001, and I teach at a conservative university. And that conservative university, like many American universities, splits academic sort of scholarly work apart from what gets called applied work. And if in fact I had talked about the kind of work that I was doing initially with something called the Papua New Guinea Institute of Biological Research, which was an organization I co-founded before I met John, or if I had talked about John's work in my kind of lead up to tenure, I would have never gotten tenure at my university. I would have been seen as someone who wasn't a scholarly heavy hitter. And so I sort of lived a double life where I did this work very quietly with John and with P&G IBR, and then more publicly, I published books and papers and gave lots of talks. And one of the things that taught me was the minute that I got tenure, I started advocating for change at my university. So I can't really see you all because of the lights, but all you tenured people, I'm looking at you. We need to change this at our universities. We need to make sure that the kind of work that does good in the world is equally, if not more, valued than the kind of work that is merely for other scholars. And you know, one of the other things about this is when I think about my work, I think about work that's in the world, the work that I do with John and with our elders and the communities. I think of work that's about the world, which is the scholarly work I do to produce knowledge to help others understand the kinds of life ways that people in Papua New Guinea have. And then when I think about the other work I do, I think about it as work for the world, and I think about work for the world as teaching. So many of us in this room have the extraordinary privilege to be able to teach. And so I think by braiding those three things together, I can be both a scholar and what gets called an activist, but I don't think I think of myself as an activist. And I guess the other thing to say about this is that I've tried in many ways to recede from the public face of this work that we do, because this is not my place. I am an outsider always and forever in New Ireland, and it should be John, but not just John. It should be Cornelius Gassot. It should be, you know, all of the people that do this incredible work on the ground that should be the face of this work. And I think that by supporting that, that's kind of the way I want to be in the world.
John, with years and years of work around island awareness and these other initiatives, I wonder if you have any advice for us about how we recognize what we value and what should be conserved.
Alex, I'm running, my nose is running. Can you make it quick? Yeah, I'm no good with the cold. Did God create only 5 species? Did God only create a few species? And why this question doesn't sound right to me? What does it read? We recognize what we value and what we should conserve. No, everything is connected. Everything is connected. And so, in our modest planning for conservation, we are not going to concentrate only what we benefit out of. No, because they are connected to everything. The coral and the fish and all. There are so many scientists here that knows the connections and the interactions with all these things that have been abundantly created by someone who loved us. And so we need to value the whole creation, see them as being important, everything. If you are talking about conserving only a few species, that is greed, that is being selfish. And then what do we expect those few species to depend upon, to continue to thrive? And so in our planning for conservation, for management, we should look at the broader perspective of things. Because, and as I've said, and I'll repeat it again, things are connected. Every little thing is connected. God did not place nothing on this planet without a purpose. From the highest mountain right down to the deepest depths of wherever in the ocean, nothing was created without no purpose. Everything had a purpose. That's why it was created. And everything needs to work in unison to ensure that they support themselves as that creation so that they are able to support us, human beings. And then, biblically, we must go back to the Creator. We were told to become caretaker. Caretaker of what? Caretaker of this creation. Become stewards. And so, we need to look after everything. We need to look after everything because they all contribute, they all work together to ensure we have something. We have a fish tomorrow, we have some meat tomorrow, we have veggies, we have all this. Yeah. That's my answer.
This integral wholeness, the definition of ecology from Alexander Humboldt to the present. Thanks so much for that vision. Paige, I wonder if we can return to that other question here as we move towards the end of our exchange with just a last couple of questions, folks. We've kept you past the Robert planned end of evening, but we've just got a couple of questions left. Paige, how wonderful is it that people are beginning to acknowledge that there needs to be co-production of scientific data and social scientific data alongside contemporary ecological issues that Indigenous and local peoples are confronting. This is an epistemological and a methodological transition, but I wonder if there's a risk of a kind of hollowing out of the actual processes by which co-production happens when the desire for this kind of approach overtakes the work needed to realize it.
Yeah, you know, I get nervous about language, and I get nervous when things that people are talking about in the academy get thinged by big conservation organizations. And so we watched biocultural diversity get turned into a thing. We're watching right now decolonization, which is something that many people in this room have been doing with all of their heart and soul for their whole lives, and have been thinking with all of their heart and soul for their whole lives. We're seeing that now get turned into something that big conservation organizations want to do in a single seminar for their staff, or they want to do with a bullet point list. And so when things like that get incorporated into big conservation, I get very nervous. And I'm feeling right now like there's all this incredible work being done by Indigenous scholars and Indigenous communities and allies around thinking about how Indigenous science and external science work together to make knowledge about a changing world, and that's incredible. But I'm getting nervous about seeing it turned into a thing that has a single definition and that has a single way of thinking about, well, this is the way you co-produce knowledge. And so I just, language, you love language so much, and language just always makes me so nervous.
For what it's worth, I think I love language because it makes me nervous. John and Paige, you were both friends and colleagues of Eleanor Sterling, whose memorial lecture brings us together tonight. I wonder if you would like to share what Eleanor meant to you, to all of us, in terms of your work.
Paige, I think you go ahead. I'll say mine a little later when I do the thank yous.
Yep. So, you know, I've been kind of hard on my university. Columbia is a hard place to be. And when I got there as a young scholar from a state school, and most people that teach with me did not go to state schools, they went to other Ivy League schools. When I got there as a young scholar from the state school, I was deeply uncomfortable in my own skin. I was deeply uncomfortable at all times. And I was struck by the fact that not a lot of people noticed that, and not a lot of people were kind to me. Two of the people that were kind to me, one for the anthropologist in the audience, Stephen Gregory, incredibly kind, and the other person, Eleanor Sterling, incredibly kind. She was someone who, from our very first meeting, in addition to being the brilliant, path-breaking scholar that she was just nice and fun and interesting and pretty hilarious. And so, to me, one of her huge legacies is one of just capacious kindness to the people in my classes, to my colleagues, to the people I don't really even like, just, you know, like just a loving kindness. And then also one of the other things that I think I learned alongside her was I came out of grad school really angry about environmental conservation organizations. And, you know, my first book is a pretty angry book. And I think learning alongside her made me realize that the way to affect change in the broader conservation community, the external conservation community, not the Indigenous conservation community, was to sit with people and talk to them and listen and try not to be so mad at them all the time. Try to see where they were coming from. And then the other thing I'll just say briefly is that, you know, we taught these classes together for years, and just to have a sense of humor when the really absurd stuff happens in your classroom or in the world or in an academic meeting, and to be able to treat even absurdity with loving kindness.
Oof. John, Paige, it's such a privilege and a pleasure to be here with you this evening. I wonder if you have any final words for us, those of us gathered here tonight, for our families or communities that we return to, words that we can think with together around stewardship, decolonial presence, and futures as we nurture the gardens of relations between and around us.
We only share the same planet, where I'm connected to you, my brother, through our oceans. We cannot neglect each other, say it is their problem, or times are changing now, and we have contributed to what is happening now. My people the source are being washed away. We keep on moving into where we used to, for our toilets, we are going in there. Not because it was our problem. We continue to blame you people, but we also contribute. Deforestation is one big problem in Papua New Guinea. Our Government does not see the importance of livelihood. So we are on our own. Together we stand, divided we fall. That is my message. And we work together, see each other as family. We continue to build bridges in that call or in that wanting that the bridges are connected and we work together from different lives experiences, but know in our heart that we are only one people in only one world. And I love you all.